As introduced, this is the annual report for the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency for the 2016 calendar year. Under Idaho Code, urban renewal agencies are required to provide an annual report to their governing board or jurisdiction, the empowering jurisdiction, by March 31st of each year. And so for us, that governing body is the City Council, and the report this evening is for the 2016 fiscal year. I just go over a little bit of the report organization. It includes an overview of the agency, agency profile, a overview of the Board of Commissioners for the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency, some identification of significant achievements that the agency occurred over the 16 calendar year, and then a description of agencies of the districts of the agency. That includes the Alturas Technology Park District and the Legacy Crossing District, as well as an inventory of agency-owned properties, and then it ends with our financial statements for the 16 fiscal year. As the Council may be aware, the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency was formed and organized by the Moscow City Council in 1995. The purpose of the agency is to undertake urban renewal projects in areas designated by the City of Moscow in order to improve the physical, social, and economic condition of the area and to improve the economic well-being of the community. The agency is comprised of 7 commissioners on the board that are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by this body. 2 members of that board are Moscow City Council members. So Councilmember Weber and Councilmember Betke serve in that capacity. 1 member is a Latah County Commissioner, and Commissioner Dave McGraw is that individual. And then 4 members are from the community or the citizenry at large. Currently on the Board of Commissioners for the agency, we have Steve McGeehan, who serves as the chair of the body, and Brandy Sullivan is vice chair, with Art Betke as secretary. We also then have Steve Drown as commissioner, Dave McGraw, John Weber, and Ron Smith that rounds out the board. They are a great board to work with, and they've been nothing but a pleasure since I've taken over the responsibilities of executive director. The agency's activities are directed within individual districts by specific urban renewal plans that are adopted and approved by the Moscow City Council. The agency's activities are largely funded through tax increment revenues, where certain taxes are diverted to the agency and are utilized to pay for public improvements and other revitalization activities within that district. The overall goal is to incentivize private investment to help diversify and strengthen the local economy of both the city and the county. When a district is formed, there is a base assessed valuation that is frozen, and then as new development and growth occurs, the tax revenues that are levied against that new development then are transferred to the agency. That is reinvested for public infrastructure to support private investment, and then at the end of that life of that district, which is currently limited to 20 years, that full tax base is then returned to all the taxing districts within the community. Some of the significant achievements for the agency in 2016, as you are all well aware, we've been working for about 2 years now on the environmental remediation of the 6th and Jackson property, and we are just now closing out that remediation process. That was a site that was previously utilized to store agricultural chemicals, primarily fertilizers, that had leaked into the soils and into the underlying groundwater. The agency received assistance from the city through the Coalition Assessment Grant to do environmental assessments, and then also was a recipient of an EPA cleanup grant to help fund the remediation of that site. We've removed 1,000 cubic yards of soils from that site, as well as installed 3 injection wells and 4 extraction wells to help treat that groundwater. We are now just coming out of that process through the voluntary cleanup program with the Department of Environmental Quality, and that has cleared the way for that site to move forward into private development, which is scheduled to be the Sangria project that's anticipated to start construction this summer. We've also partnered with a number of private development projects this year. As you may be aware, the Legacy Crossing District was formed in 2008, which was really at the bottom of the recession, and there was not a great deal of activity that happened in the district since that time period. We are seeing both the national, state, and local economies recovering after the recession, and the agency board has partnered in $40 million of private development projects, funding needed public infrastructure, environmental remediation, and other assistance to try to facilitate those projects. And so we are now going to see both through this year and into next year significant construction activity happening within Legacy Crossing and significant private investment happening within the community, which is great to see. The agency also spent much of this last year working on a strategic plan to help provide direction and guidance to the agency's activities, as well as increase public awareness of the agency's role in private development and community improvement. That plan was adopted in the spring of this year by the board, and that is, I think, will be a valuable tool for the agency moving forward in the near future. As the council is aware, there have been two districts of the agency. The Alturas district was the first district that was formed in 1996 and closed in 2015. And then the Legacy Crossing district here was formed in 2008 and will close no later than 2032. Alturas Technology Park was the agency's first district and is home to many of Moscow's premier high-tech companies. At that time, it was established, as I mentioned, in 1996 with a base assessment of $6.4 million in valuation, and improvements within that district and private development and investment increased property values by more than $20 million by 2014. The agency was pleased to be able to close that district out a year ahead of time. Originally scheduled for close in 2016. We were able to retire our debt, and close off the district in 2015, and disperse back about $850,000 revenues back to the taxing districts with the closure of that district. The Legacy Crossing District, as I mentioned, was created in 2008 and is the second district within the community. It covers approximately 163 acres, primarily focused on the historical ag industrial corridor located between the University of Idaho campus and downtown. As mentioned, that was created here in 2008, and that base assessment valuation is approximately $48 million. And we haven't seen quite as much growth there. We are starting to see that, and we expect to see, as these new projects come online, to see that increment valuation grow fairly rapidly over the coming years. As I mentioned, there's approximately $40 million in private investment currently underway, including the Gritman Medical Office Building, Sangria Downtown, as well as Identity on Main and a few others. We're also required to provide an inventory of properties that the agency currently owns. There are 6 lots within Alturas Technology Park located in Phase 2 of Alturas that the agency currently owns that are currently marketed for sale. And then there is the property at 6th and Jackson that was acquired by the agency to try to facilitate the Hello Walk pedestrian walkway, and also will be the site for the Sangria development. So those are the 7 properties currently held and owned by the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency. Turning to our financials, first looking at revenues. Again, starting at the bottom, we do have investment earnings. These are earnings we earn on the agency's holdings that are invested in the various investment vehicles. Generally, that runs around $2,000 to $3,000 per year, so it's not a substantial source of revenue. We also have grant funding, and this is largely the EPA cleanup grant that we received. We had about $4,500 that was received in that grant in 2015, and then about $145,000 that was received for cleanup activities that occurred in 2016. The next line up are increment revenues, tax increment revenues for the Legacy district. As you can see, we had some growth, and then there was a calculation error of that increment from the Latah County Assessor's Office, so we saw a little decline as that correction of that calculation was made. And then we've begun to see that growth again going up in 2015 and 16 and ending up at about $180,000. And again, we expect to see that grow substantially with the projects that are currently underway. And then the Alturas tax revenues from 2009 here to 2015 grew from about $330,000, $310,000 up to about $407,000. Then with the closure of that district, no additional revenues will be received by the agency. Corollary, looking at our expenses, starting here with general agency expenses, the purple line, those have generally ranged between $77,000 here to about $91,000 in 2015, and then declined about $33,000 in 16 to $58,000. That really was a result of the transition of the Executive Director Services. The Executive Director for the agency was previously a position that was funded jointly between the City of Moscow and the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency, and there were additional fee for services the agency paid the city. Those services were combined into an amended agreement for services, and that ended up reducing the general agency operating expenses by about $33,000. Within Alturas, we had fairly low expenditures, just with some maintenance obligations. There was a project in 2013 to extend a sewer main that was identified as needing to be, that should have been extended in the initial construction of Phase 2. So there was a $71,000 expenditure that occurred at that point in time. There were a few pedestrian improvements and sidewalk repairs that were done in 2015. And then the large expense, $849,000 of the $854,000 there in 2016 was the disbursement of the excess tax revenues with the closure of the Alturas district. So that was dispersed back to the county office for that to be distributed to the taxing districts. Yes, sir.
Do you all know offhand how much of that Moscow City got? 25%?
I don't know that number.
Excuse me?
The
So
disbursement,
what part of that
A portion of
854
the
It's about
that the city of Moscow got?
239,000, I believe.
How much?
I believe it's 239,000 if I
you.
recollect correctly.